What is up, everybody? Welcome into our YouTube channel live stream for today, celebrating our 3,000 subscribers milestone today. So thank you for all of that. Happy to talk about some Chargers questions. Hopefully we get some non-Chargers questions. I'm interested to see what you guys in that regard. But obviously very happy to be here. Very happy that my guys Tyler and Alex are here as well. Alex, we'll start with you today, man. How you doing? You getting ready for that big move? What's the feeling like today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm just tired. And some of you are annoying. But overall I'm pretty good.
There we go. Tyler, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. I'm a little bit tired too, but I'm just here with a positive smile and a good attitude and whatever.
Good vibes only today. So as always, we'll have some questions from Patreon that we will get to. Yes, happy Friday, Craig. Thanks for joining in, and Kevin, and as well as Arjun. Or it looks like Arjun is not joining, but shout out to Arjun, man. He's been crushing it lately. He's going to join us on Sunday since Alex is likely unavailable. Obviously, TBD, depending on the move. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about some questions. As always, the super chat feature should be enabled. And we got some other big news aside from the 3,000 subscribers today, which, as you can see at the bottom scrolling there. Alex, why don't you tell the people about our new partnership with Busser Betting?
So we are the official, Booster is the official sportsbook of us, the Guilty as Charged podcast. So if you use code NFL100FP, you will your first submission will be matched 100%. So if you really desire betting on how many sacks Chris Rumph will have this year, you can have you can bet $200 on that if you really want to, if you're riding high. So they are our official betting partner, our official sports book. So go over there and use code NFL100FP. Thank you for my daily shilling.
Kevin, I hope you do become a more degenerate gambler and use that code.
Gambling is illegal. Online gambling, that's another story. And use code NFL100FP at booster.com/guilty.
And Booster covers everything. It's not just NFL stuff. It's not just Charger stuff. Obviously, you can go bet on the Chargers' odds to win the AFC West. They even have a prop bet for who leads the league in passing yards. Herbert has some really good odds for that specific bet. So you can go check that out if you're into college football betting. I know that's a big thing. Booster is your official hookup. So yes, go use that link. All right, let's get to these questions. We'll start with the Patreon questions first. We'll mix it up a little bit today. But cool. Sam on Patreon wants to know our favorite Chargers memory. So I'll start with this one first. I think the 2018 season is obviously one that really comes to mind. But man, it's hard to beat your first NFL game. And so that's going to be my favorite Chargers memory. It was 2004, I believe. And this was still the Drew Brees years. The Chargers were playing the Tennessee Titans. It was a Thanksgiving weekend kind of game. And so really had a great time. I was a little kid and was really all in on the Chargers after that. LT had like 170 yards, a couple touchdowns. Gates had a big day. Sean Merriman had a big day. So really ever since then, I've been all in on the Chargers. And so my first NFL game is going to be my favorite Chargers memory.
I think the 2018 season, specifically the Chiefs game, like that has to be up there. It's just like all-time favorite moments. My first NFL game was the Chargers Giants game. Actually, I went to back in 2017, so that was fun. They were both 0-4 heading into that game, but that's when the season started to turn around, and so that was fun. And Phillip Rivers gets another win over Eli. So that was great. Other than that, like if we're just kind of going like more retro era, and by retro era I mean in the last 20 years, I feel like the win against the Colts in the playoffs, that's one of the really great ones too. Just Darren Sproles walking it off, and every stadium goes loud, and they they had beat Peyton Manning before in the playoffs, but it was just always great to try to beat him.
Absolutely. Out of curiosity, how much were tickets to a game against the Chargers and Giants when they were both 0-4? It was like $20.
Well, I bought them when they were at a more increased value point in time. So my tickets were pretty good. They were, I want to say, like $80. Yeah, so not too bad. But yeah, so 2 people, so total I spent $160. But yeah, it was fun.
Gotcha. My favorite memory has to be the 2014 game against the reigning champion Seahawks, because the Chargers had no chance of winning, apparently. But just the throwback game that Antonio Gates from Rivers had, they didn't care. Legion of Boom Who. We got to see a little bit of Keenan Allen versus Richard Sherman. Everything from Percy Harvin stepping out of bounds and scoring that touchdown to, I believe it was Sharice Wright, like having a game-winning sort of tackle to help close out their final series. It was just a really great game. And one of the last times that I remember the epic fan attendance and feeling and that atmosphere that I really haven't had much of since, obviously not at StubHub, and then no games at SoFi so far. So really, 2014, that game, the Chargers had just, won a playoff game the year before, and everything looked like it was going to be so good. Like the McCoy era has started. They're beating the reigning champion Seahawks, who just destroyed the Packers the week before. Here we go. And now we're on with their head coach. So things have changed a bit since then. But in that moment, we were on top of the world, and we were great fans, and I really loved that moment. So yeah, that's my favorite moment for sure.
Speaking of Gates, I would like to mention when he broke the touchdowns record against the Dolphins. I think that first season in Los Angeles. I think that's in there just because, people weren't super confident about the move at the time, and there was the whole fan situation. So for that moment to happen and give people a little bit of life and a little bit of energy, I think was really important at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are so many memories to choose from, right? I'm glad that you guys chose some. So I want to go back to, I guess Kevin used to work at a casino for 6 years and has seen people bet $50,000 on one single hand. So
don't bet 50,000.
Yeah, don't bet $50,000.
Keep it a little more reasonable.
Oh yeah. But in 2017, my family, we went on a cruise to Mexico, and obviously you have the little mini casinos in the cruise lines, right? And so me and my brother Michael, we went and we were just walking around and we, had some fun, gambling. We were both in college. And I sat down next to this huge individual, he looked like he was 350 pounds, 6'5" or 6'6". And I sit down next to him, and I noticed that he has this huge ring on his finger. It was a NFL Hall of Fame ring. And it was Larry Allen, the offensive lineman from the Cowboys and 49ers.
Okay. Nice.
And we were playing blackjack too with him, and he would bet the 1,000 equivalent of his children's birthday, on each hand. So one of his children was born on the 30th. So on that specific hand, he would bet $30,000, and then the next hand, his child was born on the 12th. So he bet $12,000 on that hand. And this man dropped probably $100,000 in the 15 minutes that I was watching him. So that was definitely an insane gambling experience. Really, the only one I've had. I've only sat down and gambled 3 times in my life.
Yeah.
But watching Larry Allen gamble hundreds of thousands of dollars in minutes was definitely surreal.
Who was playing with him?
He was there with his cousin, I think, and then me and my brother. So it was literally just the 4 of us.
How do you play with him?
I didn't. I sat down and I had $100, and I was like, let's go, let's earn some money. And then Larry Allen's like, here's $31,000. And I was like, oh, so I'm out. It was fun. It was a really, really fun experience. So
nice.
All right. So again, let us know if you have any questions. Drop them in the chat, and then we'll go over things. So Eduardo Terminel. He says, hi, everyone. How is the punter competition going? We hear a lot about the kickers, but nothing about the punters. So, Tyler, you've been at practice the most. You've been at the scrimmage. What have you seen from the punter, quote-unquote, competition?
Well, I can say that Tai Long is still working with the 1, so I don't think there's any chance that he's up-seated anyway. The only thing that I ever paid attention to from Edwards was at the scrimmage where he shanked a punt out of bounds, and that kind of told me all I needed to know. So Tai Long is still in the lead for the job.
Yeah, I've never thought that it was much of a competition. I know some people get on Tai Long for, the punts last year, but like he was top 10 in like air yards and was dealing with that terrible blocking. So to me, I've never seen a reason to really replace Tai Long. And that's just how I view it. So to me, it's not really a kicking competition. Like Tai Long and Mike Badgley are not they're not on the same level of on the hot seat.
No, I think there were definitely some games where Tai Long kind of struggled, but also I think the Chargers are kind of looking at it as, you improve the coverage unit, you improve the protection, and that's kind of hopeful that Tai Long is able to refocus in, and hopefully he's not doing kickoff duties as well, so he's able to stay a little more fresh in the games and really focus in on punting. Matthew Henriksen, man, that's a really cool moment. He said he got to meet Junior Seau in 1994
Wow.
at one of the restaurants, and then I'm guessing that was the Super Bowl year.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
very
Wow.
cool memory from Matt Henriksen. And shout out to Matt, man. His energy is unreal. We met him at training camp, Tyler and I did. You can always see his videos on Twitter and stuff like that. His energy is outstanding that he brings to the Chargers. So shout out to Matt. Next question. Oh, we got a super chat question. Oh,
No, it's just telling us to pump out the great content. So thank you for that, Herman.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you. Where did that question go? Okay, Anthony Wiltshire wants to know what our favorite guest interview is. So I've done most of the interviews. Alex has helped out a bunch. So Alex, we'll start with you here. And then Tyler, you can kind of maybe say your favorite one that you've listened to, I guess. So Alex, go ahead, man. What's your favorite interview that you've done?
It's a little recency bias, but I really enjoyed our talk with Steven Anderson. Austin Eckler was a cool moment too. But
Yeah.
Steven Anderson, I just thought was a really fun, personality to talk to when he, let me congratulate him for spelling his name correctly. And we had some fun back and forth with him. So I'll go with that one. As far as, all the writers that we've gotten to talk to are pretty great with Daniel Popper and all those guys.
Yeah.
I really liked Steven's interview with Jeff Duncan, just personally. But yeah, so I would go with Steven Anderson as our favorite guest, or my favorite guest.
Well, I interviewed Rike once, so shout out to my favorite interview, Rike.
There you go.
Shout him
There we
out. I
go.
hope you're listening, or hope you're paying attention, or somebody is. Yeah, Rike, you are my favorite interview by far.
Yeah, Rike and the Die Hard Bolt Club have been crushing it for sure.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed, like Alex said, my conversation with Jeff Duncan. Obviously, I had been able to sit there and read his book over the summer, and so that was a lot of fun for me. Yogi Roth was a great conversation. That was our first interview, our first episode. So in the spring, I went back and listened to that interview because I wanted to see what he had said about Herbert. Man, I was just like, who's this scrub interviewing Yogi Roth? Like, you can hear my voice like shaking, man, and man. So it's just kind of fun to sit back and listen to that interview and listen to how far we've come. We did an hour and a half on quarterbacks as our first episode with Jason. So that's always a lot of fun to listen to. And Yogi is a great guy. He was a great interview. And I'm glad that we were able to kind of squash the Justin Herbert narratives right out the gate, which was huge for me.
Absolutely.
I also would mention I did a solo interview with the guys who did the Bolted podcast, which is a really good show that they did over there, and talked about San Diego and LA and the whole 9 yards. I thought that was a really fun conversation to someone who doesn't know San Diego politics and California politics and how that all worked. So it was really great to talk to them.
Yeah, Alex, if you want to talk about that move from San Diego to LA anytime, have at it.
I'm not gonna get myself in fucking trouble.
It's all good, man. I think we've all prided ourselves on covering both sides of Chargers football and anything related to it, and sometimes you got to talk about the negative things. Obviously, we try and focus more on the positive side of things, but sometimes you got to be negative about it. Michael Daly, Alex is still going to be on the show. He's not moving to Antarctica.
Yeah, I actually am moving to Antarctica, so I hope the internet connection there is okay. But yes, I will still be on the show unless they want to replace me. I don't know.
Yeah, he's still gonna be on the show. He's gonna have some great time going down and studying some penguins, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, let's get to a Patreon question. Sean Taylor wants to know, what is the bare minimum record the Chargers need to have this year for you to believe the organization is going in the right direction? And how would that record change depending on lots of key injuries or no key injuries? So Tyler, we'll start with you on that one.
Key injury, that's just so tough. Key, like Herbert goes down, like what's the bare minimum record? 2 wins. Like I hope to God that they make it through that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say everything goes well and they're healthy and pretty solid going into the end of the year. I mean, they got to go 10-7 for me. I think they have to show me. Again, it depends. Like if they lose some weird games, but they find a way to beat the Chiefs and the Patriots, maybe the Browns somewhere in there, but they go like 9-8. I actually think that would still be a step forward, and I feel confident in them. I guess it's more about the quality of win, although I would hate to see them lose against poor quality opponents like the trash Eagles. Look, anything 9-8 or higher, I think would be solid for me because there's so much turnover on this roster. They have to learn so much. As Jeff Duncan pointed out, we just talked about that interview. It took 2 years for Breeze and the Saints to even reach the level of their kind of peak, if you will. So if the Chargers are able to do it, and get somewhere close in year one, but they're not quite there yet, that's okay. As long as they continue to trend upwards, I'm happy with that. So like 9-8 this year, and then you got to be a 10+ win team next year, without a doubt.
That was a really funny Eagles dig, Tyler. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But yeah,
Joe Flacco coming for that QB1 spot, man, according to PFF.
He threw a screen pass. No, he's not coming for shit. Anyway, I think in terms of record predictions, it's really tough. We talked about with Robert Mays, like the range that this team has, right? Like it could be a 13-win team and it could be a 7-win team, depending on what things happen. So I think keeping range is a better goal kind of in mind. So I look at this team and say, if we're looking for improvement, I think 8-12 wins is reasonable. And that's sort of accounting for if Derwin goes down, if somebody goes injured, or maybe the offensive coordinator isn't as great as we thought, et cetera, et cetera. I think 8-12 wins is a reasonable expectation. And for me, it's not so much about record because that wasn't the reason that I thought Anthony Lynn deserved to get fired last year. Right. I mean, if you actually look from year to year, they did win 2 more games. Right. And if I told you, hey, I time traveled back to the beginning of 2020 and I said, hey, Anthony Lynn is going to, win 2 more games with a rookie quarterback. And it looks like it's smooth sailing. It's like, well, you need the context of the season and the fact that Justin Herbert had this great year and the fact that the play calling wasn't so great, and everything like that. So for me, I just don't look at it through the lens of, they have to hit this number. It's a matter of what the team looks like, right? You could tell me Justin Herbert misses 3 games and suddenly 8 wins looks very impressive. And you could tell me that, something you could make less impressive about the coaching staff to the fact that they got 10 wins, right? So, that's just what I am, but I am expecting in the range of definitely 8-12 wins this year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I think obviously the context of the season matters quite a bit. If Joey Bosa and Derwin James continue to struggle to stay on the field, but the offense looks really good, the offensive line really gels together, they protect Justin Herbert, I would still consider that a successful season as long as they're able to get to that 8-9, maybe even 10-win mark. But it's hard for me to look at the end of this question and key injuries, what does that look like? If Austin Eckler goes down, what does the running game look like? If Corey Linsley goes down, what does Scott Quessenberry as starting center look like? There's just a lot of question marks. If the team is healthy or at least relatively healthy, I think they should be pushing 10 wins or more. If you're losing, your core players, then anything past 8 wins is a bonus, in my opinion. If Corey Linsley plays 8 games or Joey Bosa plays 9 games and they're still able to get to 9 wins, that's a huge win, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. So I saw this question from Craig. about pregame food, and everybody knows I like to talk food. So let me get this thing. He says, "Who's a dork like me and has a planned meal for tomorrow's game?" So I'm going to be at a wedding. So I'll be eating at a wedding before the game. But normally pregame meals, guys, what do you have out for Chargers games on a normal Sunday or normal Monday night?
Ooh, that's tough. I will say at games, I don't eat unless they're up by like 52 points. I cannot eat. I'll get a water maybe, but otherwise I'm just sitting there so like hyped and nervous at the same time. But if it's close, I'm not eating at all. My dad hates me for that because he wants to go eat hot dog and nachos or whatever. I'm just like, nope, not eating. And I can eat a ton of food, but on game day at the game, I don't eat. But as far as planned meals go, like I don't. You're kind of a dork, Craig.
But Tyler, what about like you're watching an away game or
Okay.
like you're just like hanging out watching football? Like what do you do for those kind of instances?
Whatever, man, like barbecue, like hot dog, hamburger, like some basic stuff. If I'm having like more people over, like relatives or something, I don't know, whatever. Like I'll eat anything, tacos, sushi, like whatever. I'll DoorDash something. It depends. Depends on the mood.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't like to eat during games either, actually. Yeah, just because there is that, stress, whether it's a Chargers game or something like that. Usually my palms like just generally do get like sweaty, and I start feeling like the nerves. Whether it's a playoff game, regular season game, whatever it is, in really any sport where I'm following my teams. If I'm watching something else or something casual like the Super Bowl, right? For me, then I think pizza
It's casual because the Chargers are never in it.
Yeah. Well, the one year the Eagles were in it, or two in my lifetime. Yeah, it was stressful, but yeah. So I didn't eat during that, but usually I will eat like wings or pizza or something. But I don't really plan it out. I'm also whatever's in the fridge kind of guy. So when they were getting shellacked by the Patriots, I had some Chinese food in the fridge. I put it into the microwave and turned the game off. So that was not a fun memory. But yeah, I don't love eating during games. And specifically regarding pizza, none of that Domino's crap or any of the shit you get from national chains, because that sucks. And I'm from New Jersey, so I just had to stick my flag there.
Unless you're drinking, then it's all right. You can live. It's all right. Cold pizza, playing beer pong is all right.
Yeah, if you're, I can't speak for beer pong, but late night snack, I think Domino's pizza, that's okay. But I generally prefer local as well. I'm a big
Domino's.
pizza and wings guy. Yeah.
Domino's, if you would like to sponsor the show, go to killteamstartpod@gmail.com.
I love Domino's. I eat it for every meal before every game. It gets me ready for it.
There we go. and drinking a cold Pepsi too. Pepsi, hit us up.
Love Pepsi.
It looks like Jeremy Jones commented that he's going to make some carne asada nachos. That sounds amazing. Do you deliver to Fresno? Because hit me up. But in terms of like the Super Bowl, man, I'd make this like Italian sausage queso dip that I take to the Super Bowl every single year. That's one of my favorite things to do. And then the Super Bowl is nice because you just like snack throughout. And whether that's wings or pizza or burgers or whatever the case may be, Super Bowl Sunday, man, should honestly be a national holiday 100%. In my opinion.
And the next day
too. Like it's just amazing. But I'm not a big eating at the stadium guy either, frankly, because the food is just not worth what it costs. Like that hamburger sub. If anyone had the hamburger sub on Sunday at the scrimmage, like let us know. You didn't see it anywhere?
Oh, I didn't see people eating it. Not that I was like, oh, what's everybody eating? But I didn't notice it. But the hot dogs they served were like shriveled little weenies. There's way too many jokes you could have made from it.
So yeah, if anyone had any of the food at SoFi on Sunday, let us know what that was like. Victory brisket. If I had a Traeger, I would definitely do a Victory briskets. I think that is a huge thing.
Okay, I have a question. Since this doesn't ask me anything, is using a Traeger cheating? Is that like not cheating, but like, do you lose the ability to grill, like be a grill master if you literally just like plug it in and it does all the work for you and then it's delicious? Like, is that cheating?
I mean, no, I don't think so. Because you still have to like prepare it, you still have to season it. I think
That's easy.
seasoning, yeah, but I mean, like you still have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I guess
I mean,
difference
Lance
between like
Armstrong
actually
still
cooking a
had to run the
medium rare
race, too.
steak versus like just throwing it in a thing, hitting play, and it does the whole thing for you.
Yeah,
You can still grill. Oh yeah, that's true.
Jake Hefner says no, it's not cheating. I'm really excited. You know, we're saving up to get a house next year, and I'm really excited to get a Traeger and get a grill and really start being able to do that. Because right now, at our townhouse, we just don't have room. Like we have a tiny little backyard, so we don't have room for anything. Thomas Martinez says 10 a.m. East Coast games is always homemade egg, English muffin sandwich, or breakfast burritos.
Not bad.
I like that as well. If the Chargers do play morning games, I definitely cook a big breakfast. So definitely feel that. All right, let's get to the next question from our guy Matthew Henriksen. He wants to know if Mike Williams' hip issues is an ongoing issue. What does that do to the deep wide receiver core? In what position group is losing a player to cover the extra wide receiver we may need to carry now just in case? So I assume he's asking if the hip issue like lingers into the season and causes him to miss games, maybe get put on IR. What does that do for the wide receiver position? I think that's why they drafted Josh Palmer. Like I think that is the short answer is Josh Palmer would have to step up. Tyron Johnson had to step up. That's probably an opportunity for Jason Moore to make the roster, especially if you're putting Mike Williams on IR. And the NFL is doing that thing again where you can place a player on IR for just 3 weeks. So then you don't have to add an extra receiver as opposed to you just put Mike Williams on IR. You keep Jason Moore, and then after 3 weeks, you reevaluate. And if you need to cut Jason Moore and put him on the practice squad, you're able to do that. So unless this is really like an 8-game kind of absence, I'm not super worried. And Coach Staley did say that he's just dealing with a minor hip flexor, so maybe just a little tightness. And I think he said as well, if there was a regular game this week, that Mike Williams would be able to play. But that being said, if it does linger, I think the Chargers are fine. They'll still be able to have a really deep receiver core, and that's also why you have Jared Cook, Donald Parham, Austin Eckler. So the Chargers will be fine. I think the skill players is like the one position group where if they lose somebody, I'm like okay with it. Obviously, I don't love if they lose Keenan Allen for a little bit. But if Mike Williams misses games, I think the Chargers will be fine.
Yeah, I do think they'll be fine. Speaking of Mike Williams, I did just get a Bleacher Report notification on my phone from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN that Mike Williams and the Chargers are unlikely to reach a contract extension before the season. So that is sort of kind of breaking news that we already knew, but that is an update. As far as if he's injured and misses some time, I think you pretty much just move everybody up on the depth chart, right? So Tyron Johnson pretty much becomes wide receiver 2. I think you have Guyton and everybody else in there. Josh Palmer obviously would have to step up in that kind of scenario. And then I do think you carry somebody like a Jason Moore who, can maybe step in and play a couple snaps if he's needed, or just be the guy that's there in case anybody else gets injured, right? And he does have that same kind of, not same skill set as Mike Williams, but a similar kind of type of skill set. I think that does open up the door for Jason Moore to make the roster. But from what the organization is telling us, I'm not concerned about Mike Williams' health unless he suffers some kind of other injury.
Yeah, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. If anybody's, sliding in, it's Jason Moore. But otherwise, they have so many weapons. They are likely, and I'm betting on them keeping 4 tight ends anyway. So you have plenty of bigger pass-catching options there as is. So, yeah, it's not a huge deal. But again, if he goes down, if I had to pick a position group to lose somebody, it's probably linebacker. Like, I don't think it would be DB. Like, I don't think they would. Like, I think they should keep 6 corners. I don't think they would go to 5 just because of Mike Williams' injury or something like that. So I'd say linebacker because that's just the least valuable so far. And I would hate to see someone like Cortez Broughton, who's apparently really stepped up. I would hate to see him go too. So if I'm making cut anywhere, it's Ogbongbemiga or Neiman.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is spot on. Like I said, I don't think that they would have to carry a 7th receiver. I was looking at the depth chart of some other teams just on Twitter the other day, and apparently a lot of other teams keep like 7 receivers sometimes, and I just like don't understand how that works.
That's gross.
Like, yeah, that really just like doesn't make any sense to me. Like why he would keep that many people. or that many receivers specifically. So follow up on Mike Williams here, as you can see on the screen. Jeremy Jones wants to know what kind of stat line Mike Williams would have to put up in order for the front office to give him a new contract. So you said Jeremy Fowler is the one who said that they're unlikely to reach a contract extension?
Yeah, Jeremy Fowler apparently said that on ESPN TV, and I got a Bleacher Report notification. So that's that is what he said.
There we go. Breaking news on the podcast, which is not really news. Anyway, so Mike Williams, like, let's say that he plays, 16 games. I don't think he's going to play all 17 because he never does. Let's say Mike Williams plays 15, 16 games. What kind of stat line does he have to put up to merit another contract with the Chargers? Tyler, we'll start with you on this one.
He's not getting one. He's either going to do one of two things. He's either going to underperform and get hurt, and they're going to let him go, or he's going to overperform and it'll be so expensive that they're going to let him go anyway. Like, I really don't think they're going to keep him around. I don't think there's any way he gets a contract, kind of no matter what, honestly. Like, I mean, if he goes for, like, would I invest in him further if he has a really big season? I just don't know if that's worth it long term. Like, I have more injury concerns with him than I do Hunter Henry. And Hunter Henry, I was on the fence on, even though I prefer to keep him because I thought he was a little more important to Herbert than Williams was. So I don't know. Like, I just don't think there's a world where he actually returns to the Chargers next season. And considering they drafted Josh Palmer and have found some other options like Tyron Johnson, I just don't think he returns. I'd rather pay Tyron Johnson far less than Mike Williams, almost $20 million, whatever he's going to command if he has a huge year.
Shout out to Dan Wolkenstein in the chat from that Chargers Unleashed pod. Congratulated us on 3K. So happy to see you here. And as far as the contract, I think it's interesting because I really don't think it's about stat line. I think it's about two things. It's really about kind of the market, what that will be for him like after the season. And I think it's also about replaceability, right? I think that's more important because if you look at Hunter Henry's numbers, he was fine last year. He had 770 yards, I think. And I believe he had, 5+ touchdowns, something like that. So he was good. I mean, statistically last season, it just came down to he was asking for $13 million, and the Chargers didn't seem to be that into him as a player. And they felt like, hey, we have Jared Cook in this new offense, and we can basically get the same production, right? If they feel that they can, put Josh Palmer in that same position and he'll produce similar numbers, then I think they'll do that. If somebody like a Devontae Adams or somebody like that in free agency is available, then they may go that route, right? There's a lot of things they can do, but to me, it's much less about like, oh, well, he needs 1,200 yards or he needs 10 touchdowns. Like, I really just don't think that's how Tom Telesco operates. I mean, he's given contract extensions to players that didn't necessarily like put up huge production before and kind of bet on future production, right? I think Austin Eckler was a little bit like that. I mean, Austin Eckler did have a really good year, but, he wasn't, say, a top 10 running back in the league when he got that contract extension, right? It was just like, well, let me give him this extension early, and then, we can kind of roll from there and have our spot secured for the next 4 years, right? Yeah. On that $24 million deal. So to me, I don't think Telesco really functions based on like, plus minus, like just here are the stats. I just think he sort of says, can I replace this player? Or, is this player too important for me to release or, kind of leave in free agency?
Yeah, and we've heard from a couple writers, specifically Daniel Popper, that the front office, and I think specifically the Spanos family, really loves Mike Williams. They're big fans of the kind of person he is and the kind of player he is. And like, people think that we just hate Mike Williams at this point, which is just not true. Like, he's one of my favorite players to watch because he just, like, what he does is insane on a weekly basis. It's just from a business side, it just gets a little dicey because if Mike Williams has a huge season, like Joe Lombardi said a couple months ago, and he has like 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns kind of season, well, then you're getting into like the $18 million, $20 million price range because that's where the wide receiver market is. And so if you're going to ask me, would I rather pay $25 million for Devontae Adams, or probably more, or $20 million for Mike Williams, like I'm going to take Devontae Adams. And you could make that argument for Allen Robinson too, who likely is a free agent next year. Like, would I rather have Mike Williams for 20 or Allen Robinson for 23? Like, I'm going to take Allen Robinson. So I think it's not that simple. Like, it's not just going to be like you sub one in and for the other. But I just like, I would have a hard time sitting there and watching Mike Williams get a huge contract and knowing that he's not going to be the number one receiver, that he's not going to be, a guy who really just commands the ball. Of course, he can have a great season. He can bring value to the team. I just don't know what that looks like in terms of the contract. Like, in my opinion, if you give me $20 million for Mike Williams, I'd rather take 5 or 6 for Tyron Johnson extension and then go get like Michael Gallup. Like, if you're telling me I need to add a receiver in free agency, like, I think that's a great alternative. It just, I have a hard time really seeing the worth in adding in a $20 million per year Mike Williams extension.
For what it's worth, Spot Rack
Yeah, and
has
I
him
think
at $10.3 million a year market value, but that's obviously not good. Like, that's not, I don't think it's really considering a great year
No.
that he would have. So
Yeah.
Chris Godwin's at 17 million.
I mean, I think 10 million is really like the floor for Mike Williams, right? Because he is this big 6'5" receiver that can, has that skill to go up and get like jump balls, right? Like, so that is something that's important around the league, just to have that big boundary target that you could throw to. I do think it is replaceable in the league, but teams are still going to pay, base pay for that, because you can't, most receivers aren't 6'5", like, so that I think does have some inherent value in its own from his skill set. And Kevin actually brought up a good point in the chat. I think he said Telesco wasn't offering Melvin Gordon that 4-year, $40 million contract just based on, hey, these are the numbers that you gave, right? Like, that it was kind of based on the fact that Melvin Gordon was holding out and they wanted to get him back in. And just that Melvin Gordon was sort of a relatively important part of their running game at that time. And there wasn't a lot known about Eckler and some of these other guys. So, when it comes to contracts and everything like that, I think it does have to do with stats. Like, yeah, Telesco will look at the numbers, and, Staley is very analytically inclined as well. But I just don't think it's really about like numbers. I think it's much more, well, it's about numbers in terms of money that they offer him. But
Right.
in terms of like season numbers, I think it's much more about, okay, what's the production that you're going to give me? And like in the Hunter Henry situation this year, can I go get a Jared Cook plus Trey McKitty plus Parham Anderson that I think can do a relatively good job at replacing you? And so that's just, I don't think Telesco views things in that kind of sense.
Yeah. And we know that Tom Telesco is not going to overpay. Like, if the market for Mike Williams is crazy, then he's just not going to do it. So I'm curious to see what the wide receiver market looks like next year as opposed to this year, because the receiver market this year was like so poor. Like, outside of Kenny Golladay, it was like a bunch of nothing. So we'll have to see how that one shakes out. I had to laugh though, because thinking about Melvin Gordon just made me think about Dennis Schroeder and the Tyler, did you hear about this?
Maybe.
So Dennis Schroeder's that guy from Germany who was on the Lakers. Like their starting point guard. In like February, March, the Lakers offered him like an $85 million extension.
Oh, that, yes.
Yeah. And so he turned it down, and then he signed a $5 million deal with the Celtics, man. Imagine losing $80 million like that. Oh, crazy.
And you have to deal with the disgusting city of Boston.
I don't think we're offending anyone in here, so that's fine.
I don't care if I'm offending anyone. Fuck Boston. But yeah.
One of my cousins lived in Boston for like 4 or 5 years, and he hated it. He said people were so mean, and oh man, it's just not a fun city to live in. I think it'd be a cool place to go visit for sure, but I would never live there. Yeah, Craig points out too, I think people are underestimating how the organization projects Palmer going into next year. I mean, Brandon Staley loved him in the draft. And obviously, people kind of felt like he overdrafted him, but, he really saw something special in Palmer. And, it looks like that has kind of come to fruition so far in training camp. Obviously, we haven't seen him play a game, but he's been awesome to watch, man. Like, he's a great route runner. He's physical. He's fast. And I think he could definitely be the wide receiver 2 going forward. And then you can kind of maybe like draft another speedster or something like that next year. Like the Chargers will have options, which really has been a theme for this year. You know, they've really got a nice direction for the receiver room, regardless of what happens to Mike Williams.
Yeah, and I think less importantly than like, okay, this is Palmer and this is what he does, like Tom Telesco is sending you a signal when he drafts a wide receiver on day 2. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. All right, next question on Patreon. Donnie Dowdle wants to know, how has the secondary depth looked so far? He especially wants to know about KJ Sales, even though he's only been there a few days, hoping that his fellow USF Bowl can make the roster. So in terms of KJ Sales, he's an interesting prospect. A lot of South Florida people love him, just like Donnie does. I have a really hard time believing he makes the roster. I think you've got 10 defensive back spots, and I think 9 of them are pretty much guarantees. Then the 10th one, you're kind of getting into, you know, do you keep Tavon Campbell? Do you keep Ryan Smith? Do you keep John Brannon? Do you keep Dante Vaughn? Keeman Hall apparently has been coming on. So I just have a hard time thinking that KJ Sales makes the roster. I will say that he entered the field at the scrimmage with the return specialists. So maybe he gets an opportunity to like return a punt and scores a touchdown. Like, I think that would be like really the only way I see him making the roster is if he scores a touchdown in a return setting.
I mean, I'm not going to say there's no chance when it comes to KJ Sales, but I think he's really a guy, you know, connections are important, right? I mean, this is Jaleel Adai's cousin. Jaleel Adai and Tom Telesco had a pretty good working relationship in terms of whenever, you know, he was called up because somebody was injured. So there is something there. But I view KJ Sales as much more like, okay, well, if he shows us some flashes in the preseason, we can stash him on the practice squad, right?
Yeah.
I think he's much more in that tier than like actively, you know, competing for a roster spot. But he'll get some time to play, certainly because, you know, none of the starters are playing. So he'll get some time, you know, in these, at least the second half of a lot of these preseason games to show people what he has, at least on some reps.
Sorry guys, or whoever asked the question. The only time I saw him was a pass interference play. So the best I got for you.
Yeah.
He drew a DPI.
Yeah. That last defensive back spot though is interesting because John Brannon, I mean, he's got the most interceptions at camp supposedly. So he's been really playing well. Keeman Hall can be like an inside outside guy according to Coach Staley, and has been doing a lot on special teams. So, you know, it's just gonna be interesting. And then you have Ryan Smith, like Daniel Popper said on his live stream yesterday, he still thinks that Ryan Smith is a lock to make the roster. I personally don't understand how you can think that he's a lock with, oh, there we go. There's a question about Ryan Smith right on cue from Kevin Kernick. So I don't know. Like, I think it's tough for me to sit here and think that he's a lock for making the roster when we haven't even seen him practice except for the first day. Like, he's got to get back on the field, and I just don't know when that's going to happen. And if you have a guy like Keeman Hall who can kind of do that same thing, I don't know how he is a lock. I think he probably makes the roster, but I'm not classifying him as a lock to make the roster.
Did Keeman Hall play? I was just gonna ask. Did Keeman Hall play much like special teams in college and all that stuff? I don't know if we have like a record on that or anything.
I do not know the answer to that question.
I'm not. Well, it was worth a shot.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, last year I thought that the Chargers, because they signed a veteran free agent special teamer, I'm like, okay, they're going to keep this guy. Instead, they cut Darius Jennings for whatever they ended up doing. So this is kind of a similar situation where it's like, okay, you know, they signed him and he's there for special teams. So of course he's going to make the roster, but nope. I mean, Darius Jennings didn't. That's a little bit different. Like, I think he's also like, Darius Jennings was never going to do much as a receiver. I think Smith as like a backup corner. I think he was rotating with the twos early on in camp. Yeah. So I think there's a little bit more value there, but yeah, he's definitely not a lock. I would still have him making the roster if he asked me today, but we'll see how long this goes for.
I think he kind of is a lock, just because the difference with Darius Jennings, I would say, is I feel like you can probably, you know, stick a bunch of people in that kick return, punt return role and like just kind of see how it works, like they've done with Nasir Adderley and KJ Hill and all those guys, Tyron Johnson. So I feel like that's a little bit more flexible versus like a gunner. You kind of need a specific type of guy, and it seems like that Ryan Smith signing was very targeted. But that's just kind of what I thought. So I really, I'm not going to say he's a lock to make the team because obviously, like, well, if this is a 3, 4, 5 week injury that extends into the season, that brings up questions of health. But I think in that case, they would probably just put him on short-term IR, and the IR rules are such now that there's a lot more flexibility this year, apparently, from what I understand. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go that route if it keeps going on. But it seems like they are just gonna, wait it out with him. But yeah, in general, I think his special teams role and the fact that they need cornerback depth, I think that's kind of what separates him from like a Darius Jennings or some of the other guys they've signed in years past.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to stroll through some questions. In terms of Darius Jennings, like he probably was a lock to make the roster until they drafted 2 receivers, specifically Joe Reed. And then obviously things kind of played out in training camp, so that just is kind of different. Christian Farmer in the YouTube chat wants to know, how did we all meet each other and decide to start the podcast? So for those who don't know, all 3 of us used to write for Bolt Beat. Alex still does write for Bolt Beat, as we saw yesterday on Twitter. But Tyler used to be the site expert or junior editor or whatever the technical
site expert. Don't give me this junior editor bullshit. What the hell is that? Kindergarten shit. What the hell? Oh, site expert. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Because I think now they dubbed it junior editor. Anyway, so Tyler, we used to be the site expert for Bolt Beat. And obviously, I used to follow the Bolt Beat account on Twitter. We interacted a bunch. And then there was one day that Tyler was like, hey, we're looking for writers to join the show on Twitter. And so I DM'd him. I applied. Alex was a writer already. And so really the 3 of us just kind of started writing together at Bolt Beat right around the same time. And we had some good experiences. Obviously, if you've been a fan of the podcast for a while, you know that initially it was Jason. Jason was our 3rd co-host. We kind of figured that it would be best to have some California people. And then Jason decided to join the military on us. So we asked Alex to join in, had a good relationship with him. And then here we are. So that is kind of the backstory. Wouldn't have happened if, Tyler had not sent out that tweet. And then probably wouldn't have happened if AB5 were never a thing. I think we would all still be writing and just, doing that. If AB5 hadn't been a thing, then that really was kind of what launched us, because we were like, well, we can't really write anymore, so let's start talking about the Chargers. And obviously it was a blessing and a curse for us.
Yeah, we're making more money, so kiss my ass.
Well, I'm a company man, so I'm not going to say that.
Sorry, kiss my ass fan cited.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I was brought on Bolt Beat in 2017, and I thought that was kind of just an interesting experience. Travis actually is kind of relatable to me because I'm the Eagles fan on the Chargers show. So that reminds me of Travis, who was our editor at Bolt Beat, and he was a Broncos fan doing that. So he did Broncos Wire and he did Bolt Beat at the time. So that was kind of interesting and fun to do just to see like maybe an opposing fan's perspective. And he wrote really well on the Bolts. But yeah, so that's what I always think about whenever somebody's like, this fucking idiot is wearing a Foles shirt on the Charger show. And I'm like, well, yeah, I am, but I also wear a Bosa shirt and other stuff. So it evens out. But yeah, no, as far as how we all met, like, the internet, like that's really everything. And social media is just so powerful. Like we wouldn't be doing any of this shit today if Jack Dorsey didn't like jack off and just create Twitter one day. I don't know.
There we go. All right.
Thank you.
I did not know that was who the founder of Twitter was. Also saw a couple comments. Daniel Popper was apparently heated at Tyler for saying Herbert wasn't godly for one day.
He said nah on Twitter once. I'm pretty sure that was the extent. And I was a person.
Unless he said something on his YouTube live stream, I don't know.
I watched it. I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just I didn't know if he said something separate.
It's just funny, like how these narratives like pop off, like because Tyler said that Justin Herbert was off like one day, and I said the same thing at the one day that I was there.
Yeah.
And it was like, the guilty as charged guys think Justin Herbert's trash. It's like, no. He just had a bad day of practice when we were there, and that's perfectly fine. We still expect him to be, this great franchise quarterback for the Chargers. That hasn't changed. The other thing too, I guess a lot of people are saying that Ode Abuji has had like a terrible training camp. And I don't know what you guys expected. Like he signed for super cheap for a reason. He's been a career backup for a reason. Shout out to Anthony Lynn. Like he's not going to be this great player for the team. He's just there to be a solid veteran presence, and that seems like what he's been for me. I don't really know what else to say. Like he's not going to be this otherworldly offensive guard. Like he's a step up from Michael Schofield and Dan Feeney and Forrest Lamp and those guys. But he's a solid veteran player, and I don't know why anyone else is expecting anything more than that.
I mean, it's not like the offensive line has been really good overall so far. It's not like everyone's crushing it. So I think when the regular season hits, they'll be fine. As far as the Herbert thing goes, I'll read a comment. After giving Herbert a B or B plus, B or B plus, Asians are the ones who freak out about that. Okay, I don't know what this Carl guy is. There ain't no Asian named Carl. So I know this white dude's way overreacting. B or B plus, what the fuck are you, a YouTuber with no football experience at all? So before you go off on a guy learning an entirely new offense, watch everything, not the things where your non-football self thinks was off or not that good. Sorry if that didn't sound like English, but I'm just reading his thing. Yeah, so I give him a B plus, and that's the comment I got. Holy hell.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's funny whenever just like we criticize people and that sort of stuff happens. As far as Herbert specifically, like if you're not fully on the MVP train, then you hate him. It's like no, we always have liked the guy. But yeah, so I don't have too many concerns with the offensive line at this point. Also,
I know there were a lot of people yesterday on Twitter, saying that like, holy shit, Chase Young is amazing. Like that's going to be rough. And like, it might be, but it was always going to be rough anyway.
Exactly.
I really think the Washington football team has the best defensive line in the league, which is, and it's scary because 3 of them are still on rookie contracts. Like it's crazy how good that unit is going to be and is. I saw this quote that Chase Young and Montez Sweat have the goal of getting the most sacks of any duo in NFL history for a season, which I think is like 39 and a half. So basically they have the goal of getting 20 sacks each. And I don't know, like that would be a fun prop bet. Like, give me some odds on that one. I might take that one on Busser through the Guilty as Charged podcast link. Shout out to them. Selfish plug.
Who has
Tyler? I want to. Who's the record for what?
I assume it's probably someone with like Michael Strahan, because Strahan had like 3 seasons of like 19 sacks, 20 sacks. Let me look.
Oh, the single season sack record?
Yeah.
For the
duo. Yeah.
Oh, for a duo.
It wasn't
sure.
Watt and Clowney, was it?
Don't think it could be.
There's no way Clowney had that much before. What 2 guys had almost 20 sacks each or something like that?
I feel like, it might have to be Strahan.
So Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware were close.
Oh, that wasn't them.
Freeney and Mathis.
Alex,
I'm reading an article, but it doesn't say how many sacks that they specifically had.
Oh, no, I was just going to suggest whether it was like Strahan and Yara or something like that. That could have been one, but I don't know. Someone actually did ask Tyler on Twitter, what is your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? And since this is supposed to be a non-football chat questions, I thought that would be a fun one to bring up. He also, the person also says Fellowship is the best movie. I happen to think it is Two Towers, but I will ask Tyler.
You're so weird. Who thinks it's Two Towers?
It's Two Towers. I like that movie.
I mean, I like a lot about that movie. Don't get me wrong, and it finishes the ending of the movie is potentially the best. I toss in between the first and the third one. I think the better movie is probably the first one, I do think Ian McKellen in, I believe, his Oscar-nominated role as Gandalf the Grey, I just think that character is so good. And I do think Sean Bean as Boromir is really good. I do think the best movie, though, like my favorite, is the extended version of The Return of the King. That is the best one. It has way more in it. And I think everything they took out, I think they could have left it, and I still have loved it. I think that's the best of all 6 movies, if you will, if you include extended versions.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out who is the leading sack duo.
While Steven's, I was gonna say, while Steven's figuring that out, give us a super chat about anything Chargers or non-Chargers related. Specifically, you know what? Give us a couple freebies for non-Chargers related stuff, but also give us Chargers related stuff. I don't know, Steven, what were you gonna say?
Throw a Lord of the Rings question in the chat and see if I can answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Lord of the Rings, and Tyler named his dog a Lord of the Rings character that I literally didn't know until I had to Google it. So I thought I liked Lord of the Rings until I met Tyler.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Lord of the Rings is my thing. If the Chargers win a Super Bowl, I will post the age 8 to about 12-year-old video of me and my cousins recreating the Fellowship of the Ring. I will post that if they win the Super Bowl.
There you go. So it was not Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware. So Von Miller had 14 and DeMarcus Ware had 10 that one season where I thought it was them. So I don't know. I'll figure that one out later on, I guess. In terms of Lord of the Rings, I think it's Return of the King. I really like the other two.
Mhm.
And I think like the Fellowship of the Ring was just such a different and cool idea.
Mhm.
But when you go back and watch them now, I think it's pretty clear that Return of the King is like the best one.
I just get kind of irritated and skip the Sam and Frodo and Gollum stuff sometimes, where it's like,
Yeah,
okay, like Hans is on his jacket says, like I don't really care all that much. Like that's just like they're framing Sam, and it's like, all right. But the highs are higher. Like the highs are definitely higher.
Absolutely. All right, so if anyone else has
questions, that's fine. All right, you guys are too scared to ask me a question. That's all right.
I liked how Thomas Martinez said B+ dishonor on your cow.
So, what's that from, guys?
That's from Mulan.
Yeah, Mulan.
Very nice.
Ask us in the chat who the best Spider-Man is and why it's Tobey Maguire by a mile. You can ask us such questions as those.
Alex, I agree with you that Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man. I think Tom Holland is the best Peter Parker, if that makes a difference.
That's interesting.
Well, I also think Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies are like they're just better. Like I think they are more well done than they
I disagree. I completely
Spider-Man
disagree.
2 is in the top 5 comic book movies of all time.
Alex.
The Doc Ock scene in that where the tentacles start, that is so well directed. The train scene is one of the greatest cinematic scenes in history. All right, I will pray to the altar of Spider-Man 2. The Tom Holland movies are good, but the first one was okay. The second one was better, but Spider-Man 2 is the second best comic book movie of all time after The Dark Knight, and I will stand on that. It is great.
I will say that Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire is probably the best Spider-Man movie, but then you have the third one, which was just like awful.
Yeah,
and a lot of the first one was very bad too. So
the first
Spider-Man
one was
2,
not very bad. It just hasn't aged
very bad
because
parts.
it's 20 years old.
I said it had some very bad parts, but Spider-Man 2 definitely is a very good movie. I strongly disagree that it's a top 5 comic book movie and second best, but you know, it is what it is. We all have our things. We all can disagree sometimes. It's all good.
I will say, here's my hot take. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is better casting than anyone in history.
He's so good at that. J.K. Simmons is great at anything. Like he makes those farmers insurance commercials like hilarious. So J.K. Simmons is a great actor, man. He just really is. And hopefully we get to see what happens with him and Spider-Man and Tom Holland in this upcoming movie. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for us today. Apparently, Craig commented that Tyler has to retract his dork confirmation after the Lord of the Rings comments, which is totally fine.
I can retract my dork.
All right, guys. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks for subscribing and liking the channel. Really excited about where our channel is headed. And none of it would be possible without you guys and supporting the show. So shout out to you. Thanks for all the support. We're going to be doing, Arjun and I and Tyler are going to be doing a recap of the Chargers preseason game, talking about some NFL Top 100. Hopefully Alex is able to make it as well, but that's going to be our next episode. And then we've got some fun interviews continuing with some Broncos and Raiders writers doing a little AFC West preview. So definitely some things to look for there. And we will see you guys next time.